Okay, here we go. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael. V'al Yerushalayim v'al kol amo. V'al Yerushalayim shalom. V'al Yerushalayim v'al kol amo. V'al Yerushalayim shalom. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael. Shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael.
Awesome as always.
Tip of the key pot
Beautiful.
to you all. All right, so who would like to? Do you want to read, Mike, or
Oh, I'd be
Yeah.
delighted to. Thank you,
Start
Gary.
it off? Yeah.
Deuteronomy
Yeah.
7, chapter 7, verse 12.
There you go.
And if you do obey these rules and observe them carefully, the eternal your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant made on oath with your fathers and mothers. God will favor you and bless you and multiply you, blessing your issue from the womb and produce from the soil, and your new grain and wine and oil, your calving from the herd and your lambing from the flock. In the land sworn to your fathers to be assigned to you, you shall be blessed above all other peoples. There shall be no sterile male or female among you or among your livestock. The Eternal will ward off from you all sickness. God will not bring upon you any of the dreadful diseases of Egypt, about which you know, but will inflict them upon all your enemies. You shall destroy all the peoples that the Eternal your God delivers to you, showing them no pity. I wish Cynthia were here. And you shall not worship their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Should you say to yourselves, these nations are more numerous than we, how can we dispossess them? You need have no fear of them. You have but to bear in mind what the Eternal your God did to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians, the wondrous acts that you saw with your own eyes, the signs and the portents, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Eternal your God liberated you. Baruch Hashem. Thus will the Eternal your God do to all the peoples you now fear. The Eternal your God will also send a plague against them, unto those who are left in hiding perish before you. Do not stand in dread of them, for the Eternal your God is in your midst and is a great and awesome God. Hallelujah. Psalm 150. The Eternal your God will dislodge those peoples before you little by little. You will not be able to put an end to them at once, else the wild beasts will multiply to your hurt. The Eternal your God will deliver them up to you, throwing them into utter panic, until they are wiped out. God will deliver their kings into your hand, and you shall obliterate their name from under the heavens. No one shall stand up to you until you have wiped them out. You shall consign the images of their gods to the fire. You shall not covet the silver and gold on them and keep it for yourself, lest you be ensnared thereby. For that is abhorrent to the eternal your God. You must not bring an abhorrent thing into your house, or you will be proscribed like it. You must reject it as abominable and abhorrent, for it is proscribed. We stopped here for a second. There was something that really
Sure,
caught my
sure.
eye.
Where do you want to,
No, right here.
number 25? 26?
It was even before that. The Eternal will deliver them up and throwing them out in utter panic. Oh, their name will obliterate their name. And this is amazing because I was telling Gary about, like, Rabbi Foreman had this great teaching from Aleph Beta about the name that Abraham, like, he really dove deep into the Abraham story and how, like, he was like, why is Abraham so great? What is it? And and he did his thing where he looked up the Hebrew language and how, and he's like a master. He's like a master builder of everything. But what he was getting at was that Abraham, it wasn't about Abraham's name. It was about Abraham elevating the name of God to everyone. And that was Abraham's greatness. And this is all Rabbi Foreman. This is not me at all. And so when I saw that, you shall obliterate their name from under the heavens. It's all about, and I feel like this kind of goes to all of us, really. It's like when we puff ourselves up and try to make a name for ourselves, it's really not about us, It's about, the love we share between each other. But it's also about that, where does that love come from, And I believe it is Hashem who always blesses us and keeps us so close, and so all of us, and it's so wonderful. So I
Yes.
really, I thank you for allowing me to read. I rarely
Yeah.
read.
No,
I
that's
was
all right.
wondering if there were some people there who, seeing the might of God, would want to come over to the Israelites and say, I want to belong to you people. I want to be worshiping your God. I wonder what they would have said. Or maybe there were some and they just killed them off. Any
Yeah, it's hard.
thoughts? I'm the only
Well, I
one
think
thinking about it.
no, that's a great thought. It's a really wonderful idea. I mean, I think because I think Deuteronomy does say that people will notice the Israelites. They will notice that these people are different. They do different things, and they're also multiplied, and they have different ways, right? Like, how wonderful are your tents, O Jacob? It's like, I think that does come up. I don't know if it was last week or it'll come up in the future, but I think Deuteronomy is loaded with that kind of thing. Like, nations will notice, right? And,
well, it's like when the people went over to check on, the spies went over to check on and see how everything was going. I think there were 2 women who actually helped out their cottage or whatever it was like facing the front of the town of Jericho, and they helped. And because they helped, God saved them.
The other
right,
reason
Joshua,
why,
yeah.
oh no, I was going to say
Go
the
ahead,
other
Gary.
reason people might be inspired to join them is because as they were going from nation to nation, they were victorious. I mean,
Right.
that's why, like, Balak wanted to curse them, So, they were getting kind of scared, Somehow they managed to, we shall overcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I surrendered when I was there.
Looks
I
like
believe
Aruti was talking
we've
about
lived
Korach.
before
Said she
like
would have
that.
ended up in the with the rebels. All right. Did you want to keep reading, Mike, or does somebody
Oh,
else?
I'd love to, just hang out and listen.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
All
God bless.
right. Anybody else want to read?
I can read.
All right, Bracha.
Okay, where exactly are we?
Number 8:1. You shall faithfully observe.
You shall faithfully observe all the instruction that I enjoin upon you today, that you may thrive and increase and be able to possess the land that the Eternal promised on oath to your fathers. Remember the long way that the Eternal your God has made you travel in the wilderness there for 40 years in order to test you by hardships, to learn what was in your hearts, whether you would keep the divine commandments or not. God subjected you to the hardship of hunger and then gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known, in order to teach you that a human being does not live on bread alone, but that one may live on anything that the Eternal decrees. The clothes upon you did not wear out, nor did your feet swell these 40 years. Bear in mind that the Eternal your God disciplines you just as a householder disciplines his son. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Eternal your God, walk in God's ways and show reverence. For the Eternal your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat food without stint, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you can mine copper. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to the Eternal your God for the good land given to you. Take care lest you forget the Eternal your God and fail to keep the divine commandments, rules and laws which I enjoin upon you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty and you forget the Eternal your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its serpents and scorpions, a parched land with no water in it, who brought forth water for you from the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, with which your ancestors had never known, in order to test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end. And you say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is the Eternal your God who gives you the power to get wealth in fulfillment of the covenant made on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. If you do forget the Eternal your God and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day that you shall certainly perish. Like the nations that the Eternal will cause to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you did not heed the Eternal your God.
Okay. Well, anybody have any comment on that, or? It's pretty straightforward. And God says do it, and everything will work out, and don't, and
Yeah.
you know.
This
No,
kind
And
of
it's
always,
like,
this piece always confuses me.
why?
God creates a universe,
Hmm.
which it's so big we can't even fathom. Even the greatest scientists the world cannot fathom size of the
Einstein did
universe.
a pretty good job. Didn't Einstein do a pretty good job?
Yeah. All right. He's all powerful, does what he wants, or she wants, or what does he care about other gods for? I mean, what does he care about a bunch of idols? You know, he could sneeze and destroy them all in a millisecond. And he's
I think
created
it's,
he's
I think it's
created
for
probably
us.
a million other planets, probably a billion other planets that have life on it. Why is he spending the time worried about a bunch of rocks? That's always bugged me.
I think it's more about us than about God. You
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
he wants us to avoid. You know, it's more for us. It's just like God doesn't need our prayers as much as we need to pray to God. Does that make sense?
I
Yes.
do. It does. But what does he care? He's got another 100 million stars of people.
Yeah. You know what's bothered me all these years, and they were low these many. Um, it goes from God creates Adam and his wife Eve, and you get the feeling that they're the only people on the earth, and all of a sudden, all these other peoples come from all different places, and they have their own languages. Where the heck did they all come from?
Ah, yeah, that's true. You know, who knows? It is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, uh,
Well, I'm always fascinated by there's so many different races, right?
Right.
Why do we think that one race was created before every other race? Maybe they were all created together as one in the same kind of pattern as we see Adam and Eve. Maybe that was split in 5 or 6 or 7 different ways. I mean, God is so, I don't know, undefinable. I mean, I
and,
feel
and
like we need to spread ourselves out a little bit.
yeah, and Adam and Eve, they weren't married. Okay,
Well,
we
there
know
weren't.
that.
There wasn't anybody to perform the
I
ceremony.
mean, that's correct. They weren't married. There were no rabbis to take any
Yeah.
fees. I mean, it is a priest to take any fees, you know. It was so, and you have to realize, you know, if those were the two, then there's a heck of a lot of incest going on.
And who would do all the circumcising that needed to happen? Oh
They
my
Well,
God.
wouldn't.
the only one that did it was Abraham, was the first.
There you go. Yeah.
Didn't he? He did himself.
Ow.
But I still think like that God tells us this stuff. Like God doesn't care for God's purposes. God tells us we have to care for our purposes. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But
You know, the
I'll
law of
share.
nature. Uh,
I'm going to
here
share a
we are.
little story with you. My grandfather was a Moyle, and I'll never forget my father telling me this story that when a young man came to him, he was getting married and he wasn't Jewish. So he said he wanted to go the whole distance and he wanted to be circumcised. And I looked at my father and I said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, "No, but that was done in the hospital," because I think that would have been unbelievably painful.
Well, look at the country of Uganda. The country of Uganda is the only country that controlled AIDS early on in the AIDS epidemic.
Really?
Yeah, and how did they do that? They required every male to become circumcised, because circumcision lowers the propensity of getting AIDS. And
Really?
so that's why. So if you look that, you can look that up. But Uganda was the only country, and that was the way the Ugandans controlled AIDS. That and education, but that's one of the ways they controlled AIDS.
Now, how about some Jewish people that also got AIDS Jewish men who were circumcised. How did they get that?
They got it. I don't want to get into the graphic discussion, but you know, there are different entries of
Yeah.
AIDS.
Okay, I
You can
withdraw
get a
that
blood
question.
transfusion. Yeah.
You know, AIDS was not a homosexual disease.
Mm,
AIDS was a disease, period. But at the
right.
beginning, it was, at least the majority.
Yeah.
But it really isn't. It's a disease of everybody. Anybody can get it. Although right now, look at modern medicine. Modern medicine took a death sentence and created a disease that is now a chronic malady. AIDS is a chronic malady now. That's all it is.
Hmm.
HIV positive people don't die anymore. Look at Magic. Was it Magic Johnson? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. 30 years ago, he announced that he had
What's
it.
he's in his 60s or 70s now?
He's about 62.
Sadly, I remember reading there was a Jewish woman who she was involved with Hollywood for some reason. She was a writer, and unfortunately, she contracted AIDS, and
We had a member of our congregation early on, one of the first people who died of AIDS.
Is that Paul Sachs?
No,
No, okay.
how sad.
but it's a chronic disease now.
Mm.
People listened to scientists, and they created a chronic disease out of a death sentence. But they won't listen to scientists around COVID. Bizarre. It's a different world 30 years later. It's a
You're right.
different world.
All right. Okay. Would anybody
I'll
anybody
read.
else? All
Beautiful.
right.
Except where are we?
Right at the bottom, Shema Israel, Hero Israel, you were
Okay.
about to cross.
Hear, O Israel, you are about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations greater and more populous than you. Great cities with walls sky high, a people great and tall, the Anakites, of whom you have knowledge. For you have heard, it said, who can stand up to the children of Anak? Know then that this day, that none other than the eternal your God is crossing at your head a devouring fire. It is God who will wipe them out, subduing them before you, that you may quickly dispossess and destroy them, as the Eternal promised you. And when the Eternal your God has thrust them from your path, say not to yourselves, the Eternal has enabled us to possess this land because of our virtues. It is rather because of the wickedness of those nations that the Eternal is dispossessing them before you. It is not because of your virtues and your rectitude that you will be able to possess their country, but it is because, where was I? I level up, but it's because of the wickedness that the Eternal your God is dispossessing those nations before you. And in order to fulfill the oath that the Eternal made to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Know then that it is not for any virtue of yours that the Eternal your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, never forget how you provoked the Eternal your God to anger in the wilderness from the day that you left the land of Egypt until you reached this place. You have continued defiant toward the Eternal. At Horeb, you so provoked the Eternal that the Eternal was angry enough with you to have destroyed you. I had ascended the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Eternal had made with you, and I what? Stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, eating no bread and drinking no water. And the Eternal gave me the 2 tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God, with the exact words that the Eternal had addressed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly. At the end of those 40 days and 40 nights, the Eternal gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. And the Eternal One said to me, hurry, go down from here at once, for the people whom you brought out of Egypt have acted wickedly. They have been quick to stray from the path that I enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten image. The Eternal further said to me, I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Let me alone, and I will destroy them and blot out their name from under heavens. And I will make you a nation far more numerous than they. I started down the mountain, a mountain ablaze with fire, the 2 tablets of the covenant in my 2 hands. I saw how you had sinned against the Eternal your God. You had made yourselves a molten calf. You had been quick to stray from the path that the Eternal had enjoined upon you. Therefore, I gripped the 2 tablets and flung them away with both my hands, mashing them before your eyes. I threw myself down before the Eternal, eating no bread and drinking no water, 40 days and 40 nights, as before, because of the great wrong you had committed, doing what displeased and vexed the Eternal. For I was in dread of the fierce anger against you, which had moved the Eternal to wipe you out. And that time, too, the Eternal gave heed to me. Moreover, the Eternal was angry enough with Aaron to have destroyed him. So I also interceded for Aaron at that time. As for the sinful thing you had made, the calf, I took it and put it to the fire. I broke it to bits and ground it thoroughly until it was fine as dust. And I threw the dust into the rock that comes down from the mountains.
Can we stop here for a second?
I
think
am
this is-
stopping. One thing I don't believe, how could he go 40 days and 40 nights without drinking or eating?
Moses was a great man. He could do whatever he wants.
God sustained him somehow,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's exactly what we read there was something that Yeshua, the Christian Jesus said that man or humans don't live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of God's mouth.
Bread alone.
And that's, yeah, that was just read back. I believe it was right before the 9th chapter. But I love the fact that that Moses is saying that it's the evil that the people before them have done, and I mean there's some hints to what the evil is, and it's pretty bad. But so there's a lot of I don't know. There's just a lot of belief that has to happen here. And
I also think that God has convinced the people definitely by now that he is God and he's all powerful. So they aren't going to be able to complain too much. But it took them, I love the word stiff-necked. They've always used that, a stiff-necked people.
Kashay Oref.
right. But the other thing is like everybody's rebelling, right? I mean, it's like there's the chosen people in that we're reading about that they rebelled. But what about the Gentiles? The Gentiles are not even on the page. They're not even with the eternal God. They're with the carved images, and they're with Abraham's father, and like how they think that this idol is going to, make my wife pregnant or give me lots of luck or whatever it is, So it's I mean, the beauty is that it's, what's the word? It's like, it's subtle. It's a subtle beauty, right? That these people chose God, God chose them, and that the faith needs to happen. And then it becomes a symbol for the whole world. Even now, 2,000, 5,000 years later, it becomes so
Mm.
vast and so big. It's a beautiful thing, you know, and even in the rebellion, you know, because we always rebel. Everyone rebels. Everyone rebels. Everybody. I mean, that's why we're here, I think.
You want to know one of my favorite legends from the Bible is when Abraham breaks his father's idols and says, "Oh, that's the one that did it." Remember that?
I was just thinking of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so appropriate. You know, well, you know, I didn't do it. That's Shlomo over there. He did it. I think that's very clever.
It's genius. It's genius. Absolutely. It's absolutely genius. Yeah. And how, yeah. And the father says, what? You know that these gods can't do anything? It's like, why are you following them then?
It's
See,
interesting.
one thing, like, I think, like, the theme, you know, and it goes through here and it goes even into the next Prasha too. If you look at the theme, the title of the Prasha, Eikev, you know, as a result of, what is it basically? It's like everything that you do and everything that you don't do is cause and effect. So the rules in the Torah, if you follow them, the effect is the more positive one. And God gives us those to follow for us, not for God. Like when you say if God, I think in that sense, God could care less. Because if you don't follow him, well, that's up to you. You pay the price, not God. God's not going to suffer. So it's for us that the
Yeah.
laws exist. And
when we don't have laws, what happens? Chaos.
Chaos.
Chaos happens. And that's kind of where we're I feel like we're on the kind of precipice of a lot of chaos right now. Because why? Because no one cares about the Bible. No one cares about, I mean, this nation, the United States, home of the Rickenbacker, home of the Strat, was, you know, was based on these laws. I mean, it's like, I mean, Dr. Michael, you know, I know he's busy Monday nights now, but I mean, he does that whole thing. It's all about the laws of Moses. It's nothing else. And without them, we have chaos. And I feel like that's a huge problem right now.
So what are we supposed to ask God to intercede right now? We have problems.
Yes, let's get on our knees and pray with all our might, like King David did, like Judas. Oh, Judas.
Only the good people can do that, Michael. You can do it.
You're good too. We're all good. We're all good. We're all good and we're all bad. You know, let's be honest.
Sometimes we don't know it that we're bad, though. Sometimes, like some people will misinterpret something that you said but didn't mean in a negative way, and that's tough. Sometimes it's better to keep your mouth shut.
Yes, that's wisdom too. When to stop talking and just let the eternal do the work. Oh, absolutely.
And as Abraham Lincoln said, better to be silent and thought a fool than to speak and remove all suspicion.
Yeah. You know, there are some very pithy statements in the Bible that are very, very clever.
What about Jackie Mason saying that 80% of married men cheat in America, the rest of them cheat in Europe?
I never liked him.
I always liked Jackie.
Oh,
Well,
he just irritates me.
He died.
Really?
He died 2 days ago.
Oh,
93 he was.
rest in peace.
93.
Yep.
Yeah, I got fingers for you, he said, to
Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, I got you got fingers, I got fingers.
Yeah. But Ed was supposedly calling him off because Lyndon Johnson had to make he was going on like to talk about something about Vietnam.
Well, he gave Ed Sullivan the finger
effect.
and it ruined his career.
Yes, I remember that. And he was never allowed on the Ed Sullivan show again.
Yeah.
Is that right? Wow,
Oh,
I never heard that.
Oh, yeah. Ed Sullivan put his finger up and said, 1 minute. And he stuck his middle finger out and said, this one's for you. And that ruined his career.
You know, this is a
sometimes
terrible.
You got to take a risk.
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing to say, but I always looked at Jackie Mason and said, there's something about him I really don't like. He's like too Jewish. He
Well, he was a
points-
rabbi. He's an
but he
ordained.
points out all the negatives. I looked at him and said, I don't like you.
Anyway,
But wasn't his
Weird.
father a rabbi also? Or a
And his
cantor?
His
brothers.
brothers. Yeah.
and his brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
Would
how
it-
do we get to this?
Yeah, we're an interesting group that go on tangents, you know, but
Yeah.
hey, it all
Underground
leads
tangent.
back. You better believe it's subterranean, baby. Does anybody else want to read? If not, I will.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Again, you provoked the eternal at Tebera and at Massah and at Kibroth Hatava. And when the eternal sent you on from Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and take possession of the land that I am giving you, you flouted the command of the eternal your God, whom you did not put your trust in nor I just love this book of Deuteronomy. As long as I have known you, you have been defiant toward the eternal. When I lay prostrate before the eternal those 40 days and 40 nights, because the eternal was determined to destroy you, prayed to the eternal and said, O eternal God, do not annihilate your very own people, whom you redeemed in your majesty, and whom you freed from Egypt with the mighty hand. Give thought to your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and pay no heed to the stubbornness of this people, its wickedness and its sinfulness. Else the country from which you freed us will say, it was because the eternal was powerless to bring them into the land promised to them, and because of having rejected them, that their God brought them out to have them die in the wilderness. Yet they are your very own people, whom you freed with your great might and your outstretched arm. Thereupon the Eternal One said to me, carve out 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain, and make an ark of wood. I will inscribe on the tablets the commandments that were on the first tablets that you smashed, and you shall deposit them in the ark. I made an ark of acacia wood and carved out 2 tablets of stone like the first. I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. After inscribing on the tablets the same text as on the first, the 10 commandments that the Eternal addressed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly, the Eternal gave them to me. Then I left and went down from the mountain, and I deposited the tablets in the ark that I had made, where they still are, as the Eternal had commanded. From Beroth Bene Jakan, the Israelite, or as does it say in Hebrew? Uven Yisrael, Mivarad Ben, there, okay, that's cool. March to Mosera. Aaron died there and was buried there, and his son Eleazar became priest in his stead. From there they marched to Gulgad, and from Gulgad to Jobath, a region of running brooks. At that time, the Eternal set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the Eternal's covenant, to stand in attendance upon the Eternal, and to bless in God's name, as is still the case. That is why Levi has received no hereditary portion along with its kin. The Eternal is its portion, as the Eternal your God spoke concerning it. I had stayed on the mountain as I did the first time, 40 days and 40 nights, and the Eternal heeded me once again. The Eternal agreed not to destroy you. And the Eternal One said to me, up, resume the march at the head of the people, that they may go in and possess the land that I swore to their fathers to give them.
May I ask a question here or point something out? I completely forgot that God told them to pick up the broken pieces of the 10 commandments from the prior time. Why do you suppose he did that? Put it within the, in the Ark of the Covenant.
I would think because of the fact that they were inscribed, that they were still considered holy, even though they were broken. And then maybe also as a reminder of the fact that they had been broken and why they were broken. I don't know. That's just
I
my
think
thought.
of it as a reminder too, and that God was a good, a benevolent God because he was willing to give them another copy.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
God doesn't punish us. We punish ourselves by going against.
But we get into trouble ourselves, that's for certain.
Right. But that's not God's fault.
Absolutely.
because
At least not
God-
according to Rabbi Gillette. No.
No, when God gave man free will, this is what happened.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That is
And I feel like
exactly.
we're all like, I mean, when I read these things, I feel so overjoyed, even when they're really, you know, disastrous sayings in a lot of ways. But it's it's like I feel like we're not alone at all, ever, and that the message is so true even now. You know, it's like it's so good. It's such a it is a delight. What is the proverb saying, that the Torah is a delight?
All its words are all its ways are of pleasantness, and all its paths are of peace.
All its paths
Its
are
treasures
peace.
like
Yes,
yes.
yes, and I feel like, because it's I feel like this whole all the books are addressed to us in this way, so that we wake up and listen in a lot of ways, because it's not so much that God is a wrathful and violent God. It's more like we're violent people, and we need to hear it in this way. And I always think of my Chabad friends, because they say that there's 4 different levels on every, you know, we're reading this at 4 different levels, even if we are like consciously reading these things, but it's going deep into us. And I feel like that's brilliance and wisdom always.
Well, for every deed, there
Never-ending
is
revelation.
consequence, whether it's good or bad.
And everything, even if you don't do it, is a deed by indirectly. By inaction, it's also a deed. So whether everything you do and everything you don't do affects something somewhere at some point in time, whether or not it ever manifests in your lifetime, whether or not you witness the manifestation of it. But either way.
You know, I was thinking about how we interact with each other and talk about these things, and it dawned on me that this is the way the Talmud Torah people studied the Torah, and every time they read a certain portion, they would interpret it differently too. That's why there are so many different explanations of every sentence, practically.
Well, I
Because
grew
we're
up
doing
in
the
that.
same thing. I'm sorry.
Myrna, I grew up in that atmosphere.
Did you?
And what they would do is you would have a subject, and you would argue one way, and the other person would argue the other way, and then you would switch.
Oh my, that's challenging.
That switch. I mean, the difference between Judaism and other faiths is we take nothing literally, nothing. As you say, it's people say in the scripture it says, or in the and the issue is that's okay what the scripture says, but it doesn't mean what it may say. It may mean something else. And that's what we do. We question every single word. If you look at as I grew up, as you look at a Hebrew Bible, an Orthodox Hebrew Bible from, where we used to reform, but the Bible is this big. It's 18 inches by 18 inches. And in the middle is 4 inches by 4 inches. And that is one paragraph. And all around it, the other 12 inches, top, bottom, sides, are the commentaries.
Yeah.
So the books were very thick, and only a tiny bit of quote unquote scripture was in the middle, and everything around it was the commentary and the, if you will, the arguments and the around each individual word. So it's in fact, I had a very close friend who was a priest, and some of you might know him, and I gave him one of those books. It's interesting translation, but go to the Hebrew bookstore and look at all of the traditional chumishes, or 5 books of Moses. 5. They only have this much in each page. The whole book, the
Wow.
size huge of an atlas, are the arguments for every single word. Kind of interesting. And as I can tell you, what we lost in this country, and we lost throughout the world, is the fact that other than the Orthodox, we can't read and use those arguments. The Orthodox read, and they translate every one of those into multiple
Wow.
languages. We've lost it.
And the thing that I'm always so, I mean, I'm humbled and impressed with the honesty of the Hebrew Bible, right? I mean, I feel like there's no other book that's so honest about how a people were and how a people lived and how a people communicated with God and had a relationship with God. And they were so honest about it. I mean, today, we have so many crazy theories about the United States can do no wrong and how great the United States is. It's like, well, yeah, we have some greatness, but we also have some badness too. But I mean, the whole gist of the Hebrew Bible is to show the greatness along with the badness and keep it all together. And like, that's humanity. That's our humanity. It's so, and that's why it's so enriching to me. And that's why I think it's so, it keeps going, and it's so long lasting. It's eternal, like the eternal our God. It's like these people put it all down there, and even beyond the Torah, into the prophets and into the Babylonian exile and into all, the temples being destroyed. And even after the second temple was destroyed, people still remain faithful. That's like, to me, is like, holy man, the temple's gone and you're still okay. Hallelujah.
Well, the temple's like the physical structure. The Torah is like really where, that's what really, Jews, no matter if they're scattered all over the world, but the bond is the Torah,
That reminds me of a story. My son was in Copenhagen on business, and he was promised that he would be home in time for Yom Kippur. The traffic was so bad that he couldn't make the plane. So they brought him back, and he went into the synagogue because he asked the concierge where there was a synagogue, and he showed him. And Matthew said to me afterwards, I think it was an Orthodox synagogue because nobody was on the same page and everybody was coming and going at different times, which is true. But it was partly in Danish and partly in Hebrew. So he was kind of lost.
I've been to congregations in every place from Thailand to England to Italy to the Czech Republic and on and on and on. And guess what? The Siddur are all the same in Hebrew. They're all the same. The English is not there, could be the resident language, but it's all the same.
I like the fact that we translate, though, because I remember as a kid standing with my father in shul, I had no clue as to what was being said. It was all in Hebrew, and having the transliteration and the meaning on the other side, I think is much more effective for kids today. They learn more.
That's a really great point, because when we're on Zoom on Saturday mornings, a lot of times, we're muted, but when Gary's singing and he's singing in Hebrew, I start chanting in English. Oh my goodness. It just is amazing to me. And in fact, we should try this, because when Gary's singing the Hebrew and I'm chanting along in English, I feel like it goes to a different level. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
So why don't we put both of you on Saturday morning?
I don't know if Zoom can't handle it.
Won't work. It won't work on Zoom.
That's why we have to be in person. Like even the daily blessings.
It's a split second time delay. It's like a split second time delay.
How does the rabbi handle that?
He doesn't, like when I'm like on Saturdays. I mean, like when I'm singing or anything, he's mute. He doesn't do anything when I'm singing and playing.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, does anybody want to read, or has anybody not read? Or
I can read if you'd like.
All right, you could go, Dr. Ebb.
Where do I start?
Right here, number 12.
Now, O Israel, what does the eternal your God demand of you? Only this: to revere the eternal your God, to walk only in divine paths, to love and to serve the eternal your God with all your heart and soul, keeping the eternal's commandments and laws, which I enjoin you upon you today for your good. Mark the heavens to their utmost reaches belong to the eternal your God. The earth and all of your good. I'm sorry. Mark the heavens to their utmost reaches belong to the eternal your God. The earth and all that is on it. Yet it was your ancestors that the eternal was drawn out of love for them, so that you, their lineal descendants, were chosen from among all peoples, as it is now the case. Cut away, therefore, the thickening about your hearts and stiffen your necks no more. For the eternal your God is the God supreme and the Lord supreme, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who shows no favor and takes no bribe, but upholds the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriends the stranger, providing food and clothing. You too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You must revere the eternal. Only your God shall you worship. To God shall you hold fast, and by God shall you swear. The eternal is your glory and your God who wrought for you those marvelous, awesome deeds that you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 persons, and now the eternal your God has made you as numerous as the stars of heaven. Love, therefore, the eternal your God, and always keep God's charge, God's laws, God's rules, and God's commandments. Take thought this day. It was not your children who neither experienced nor witnessed the lesson of the eternal your God. God's majesty, mighty hand, and outstretched arm, the signs and the deeds that God performed in Egypt against Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and all his land. For what God did to Egypt's army, its horses and chariots, how the eternal rolled back upon them the waters of the Sea of Reeds when they were pursuing you, thus destroying them once and for all. What God did for you in the wilderness before you arrived in this place, and what God did to Dathan and Abram, sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, when the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them along with their households, their tents, and every living thing in their train from amidst all Israel. But it was you who saw with your own eyes all of the marvelous deeds that the eternal performed. Keep, therefore, all the instruction that I enjoin upon you today, so that you may have the strength to enter and take possession of the land that you are about to cross into and possess, and that you may long endure upon the soil that the eternal swore to your fathers to assign to them and to their heirs, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land that you are about to enter and possess is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come. There the grain you sowed had to be watered by your own labors, like vegetable gardens. But the land that you are about to cross into and possess, a land of hills and valleys, soaks up its water from the rains of heavens. It is a land which the eternal your God looks after, on which the eternal your God always keeps an eye from the year's beginning to the year's end. And then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the eternal your God and serving God with all your heart and soul. I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. I will also provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus you shall eat your fill. Take care not to be lured to serve other gods and to bow to them, for the eternal's anger and flare up against you, shutting up the sky so that there'll be no rain, and the ground will yield its produce, and you shall soon perish from the good land, and the Eternal is assigning to you. Therefore, impress these words upon your very heart, bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead, and teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you get up, and inscribe them on your doorposts of your home and your gates, to the end that you and your children may endure in the land that Eternal swore to your fathers to assign to them, as long as there is heaven over the earth. If then you faithfully keep all this instruction that I command you, loving the Eternal your God, walking in all God's ways, and holding fast to God, the Eternal will dislodge before you all these nations. You will dispossess nations greater and more numerous than you. Every spot in which your foot treads shall be yours. Your territory shall extend from the wilderness to the Lebanon, and from the river, the Euphrates, to the western sea. No one shall stand up to you. The Eternal your God will put the dread and fear of you over the whole land in which you set foot, as promised.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Wow. You know what I love is like how many times was the commandment given in just what Dr. Ed read? Just to love the Eternal your God. That's it.
That's it.
That's the only thing. It's
And to love
absolutely
everybody as
simple.
you love yourself. As you love everybody as you.
It's
Is that
so
Hillel's
simple.
golden rule? Do unto
Yep.
others as you would have others do unto you.
Yep.
And,
He said
and
that
we can't get it right. We can't get it right, it seems.
That's the soul of the 5 books of Moses. All the rest is commentary.
Correct. And what is going on here is this: there were no other ways of communication. People had to hear it over and over again.
You're right.
That's why they said, you're going to follow the rules. You're going to follow the 10 Commandments as just described a little bit earlier tonight. And if you don't, I'm going to come down on you with a hammer. And people had to hear that because there were no jails. They had to hear this over and over again because they read it every day, just as we do.
And I have a question of you.
Yeah.
We were talking about, like you said, the small part is the actual what's said in the Bible and the rest is commentary. Is this all sacrosanct, or are people still changing with the commentary today?
Hey, we saw it last week, didn't we? We saw a rabbi who gave a modern commentary on what's right here. I mean, we saw it.
But it's not written down anymore, though, is it?
Of course it is. There are tons of new books coming out all the time. You know, tons of new books. I'm starting to read this book. Hold on. Real quick. It's new commentary.
I got a jackrabbit.
Oh, can't find what I'm looking for. Important too. Here it is. Can you read this?
Cracking the Bible code.
Cracking the Bible code.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole new book on cracking the code. You know,
no kidding.
We wouldn't need rabbis if they didn't reinterpret this stuff, would we?
I don't
We
know.
wouldn't need priests. We wouldn't need ministers. We wouldn't need anything of this. We would all have people of honest work. Oh, I'm scared.
So what, have you started reading it?
I just pulled it out. I try to read a book a week. And this is for this week.
So have you gotten into it yet?
No, I just pulled it out. I came home from the Cape.
I'd be interested in knowing how much of it is what's already in the commentary, or what if this is all new.
I'll tell you when I get through it. Usually I can read 2 books at the same time, 2 or 3 books. But
Well, we'll wait for your review.
usually I try not to read this type of stuff, but this one popped up. You
I
know,
like the title. Sounds very intriguing.
mhm.
Did we
Whew,
finish?
you were finished.
Wow.
did it.
Gary, did you get to see last Friday night service?
Oh yeah, I was on Zoom. Yeah,
I
it
was looking
great.
for you live.
I was there. I was on Zoom.
I mean,
I was
Rebecca.
planning to go. and
I'm doing the minion Wednesday night. I'm doing the minion for David Baru.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Rebecca was unbelievable.
Mm. Oh, she
This,
always.
I understand that this is all on Zoom, not on Zoom, on YouTube. But
If it is,
I wonder if Rebecca knows Jim. You know,
Jim,
Afi,
I'm
Jim
sure.
Gwynn, the
I'm
guy who
sure.
played drums with us.
Yeah, maybe you.
Oh.
Wish you
He
were
was
there.
playing
But
drum. He was playing drums with us when while our drummer was not playing with us for a bit.
Is
Our
Rebecca
drummer couldn't play
your
with us because his
sister-in-law?
doc. Huh?
Is, is Rebecca your sister-in-law, Dr. Ed?
yeah,
And Philip was there too.
Philip was there too. I think I should invite Philip. Philip is the anti-Ed.
You two sound alike though sometimes. His voice sounds a lot like
Yeah.
yours.
So is he into your yang or vice versa?
Oh, we growing up, there were 3 boys and my father, and I think we were all different points of the compass of politics. You know,
And you got along though?
we get along, absolutely, we get along. But Philip's a flaming liberal, and I tend to be much more moderate, and it is what it is. But
And where was your father?
my father was very liberal. I was probably the furthest right, on certain things. On other things, as far as the poor, the hungry, the disenfranchised, I'm as far to the left as you can get. I still work with Bread of Life, which is Gary's been there. It's a Christian organization that I'm very involved with for the last 35 years.
But that's something that's not, I don't think of that as like to the left though. That's like something that everybody should really,
I'm sure,
you know what I mean?
It's
Like,
very
it's-
interesting. On Channel 7, my son, and I bring this up all the time because it's followed my son all over the world, literally all over the world, where Jonathan and I work to feed the hungry on Christmas, and we usually feed up around 1,400. And not only do we feed them, for the past long time now, Jonathan and I decided that if the Jewish community in Project Ezra is going to do this, that we need to pay for it. We need to underwrite it. So as you know, not only do we feed 1,400 and have food left over for the next 5 or 6 weeks, we pay for the food. And
Fantastic.
and anyway, so when my son was interviewed by one of Mr. Bodo's colleagues, the people that work for him, and they asked him, Jonathan, and it's Dr. Jonathan, and he's very charismatic. They said, Jonathan, what is your commentary? He said, people ask me all year long, what is my most favorite Jewish holiday? And he said, it's Christmas. And he said, because I can help the Jewish community come together and work with my father to feed the hungry one day of the year. And that has followed him everywhere. All over the country, people say Christmas to him, because, he's a Jewish kid. But that's it. Jonathan is very good, a tremendous speaker, and that's it. So, and And that's
Remember him when he was a little kid?
yeah, you know, Gary, you've known us my whole
Shoshana.
lives. We used to
Shoshana.
pass Jonathan and Shana around the meetings.
But I knew your dad before I knew you. I mean, when Bev and I started going together,
Yeah,
we used to see your dad. Bev would always, she knew him. She used to, but that's how I got to.
my
I
father
wanted
was
to
the
say
plumber.
good night with
Yeah,
all
he
my
was great.
admiration to you.
Yeah, Baruch, my father was every person in my family for generations had been plumbers. Terrible
Really?
business people, but plumbers. Can't tell you how many jobs my father would go in the middle of the night, and because a poor family, their one toilet broke, and he'd get up in the middle of the night,
Oh, geez.
go and not even charge them. Would never charge them. Father never
Mm.
charged
Tikkun
anyone.
alone. Tikkun
You know.
alone.
I only saw my father mad once in his life.
Tikkun olam means repairing the world, not repairing toilets.
Well,
Either way.